In this assignment, we're going to be creating a layout of our pieces with dimensions in the formation that you would cut it out of a piece of plywood. To start, you'll need to make copies of your pieces that are laid out flat. In this view, I'm looking at the top view of my pieces for my rocking chair. I'm going to select the first one. Hold the shift key down and you'll get that little plus sign, and I'm going to select the other pieces. Next, I'm going to use the move tool, and while I grab the corner of one of the pieces and I click, I'm going to hold the option key down and then pull a copy of these four pieces. Notice that they're snapping to the red axis so that I know that these are on the same plane as the first ones. Keeping this view, I've moved the old pieces sort of to the lower left-hand corner of the screen, and I'm going to concentrate now on working with these pieces. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw our 4x8 piece of plywood. To do this, you can use the pencil tool and draw the plywood across the top here. I'm going to click and drag on the red axis 8 feet and click enter. Then I'm going to click on the endpoint and drag up 4 feet and then come across using inferencing, and I'm going to create my 4x8 piece of plywood. I'm going to orbit a little bit so I can see some of the depth here, and now I'm going to use the push-pull tool and I'm going to pull that plywood up 3/4 of an inch. So 3/4 inches, and now I have a piece of plywood. I'm going to add a wood texture to my plywood. To do this, I'm going to click the little box with the X through it. This is the materials window. You'll see a home button that shows you all the colors and textures that are currently in the model, and the magnifying glass or search tool lets you browse for different types of materials that are preloaded. If I scroll all the way down to the bottom here, I can come to wood. I'm going to try to find a wood, perhaps a light wood like this. I'm going to probably make this out of a birch veneer, which is even clearer than these woods. You have to be careful with some of these. These are really for floors, so you want to find something that really looks like a wood texture. So I'm going to click this one, but before I do that, I'm going to triple click all of this so that it's all selected, and when I put my color into it, it will go on all the surfaces. So now I have my sheet of plywood. This is a standard size piece of plywood that you would find in any hardware store or lumber yard. And they usually cost anywhere between $10 to $20 per sheet. They can be heavy, maybe about 60 pounds, but it's a very common size. So now we're going to take our pieces and we're going to lay them out the way that we might cut them out if we were to use this as a pattern. Because I have these nice right angles here on two of the rocker sides of my chair, I'm going to try to line those up with the straight sides of the plywood since they're already cut. I'm just going to select the piece. You want to make sure, and your pieces should already be grouped. The plywood is, when you created it, is not grouped, so if you didn't group your pieces, they will stick. I'm going to just take the corner of that piece and I'm going to line it up here in the corner of the plywood. I'm just going to drop that right there. And if I zoom back, you'll be able to see that the piece is nicely lined up there. Next, I'm going to take the other piece. I may flip it to put it on the other side. There are many different ways that you could lay this out to accommodate and use the least amount of wood. I actually think that I might be able to flip this and put it across this way potentially, or I could flip it and do it here and then use the middle piece for the other sides, but you can use the wood how you'd like and the best way to do it economically. Remember that you have to select the item and then move it. When you move things, you want to move things from a corner to a corner, and you want to zoom in so that you can actually see what you're doing. You can always zoom out and place it afterward. If I wanted to, I could also just drag a copy. So if I wanted to show where the pieces actually went in the plywood, I could just grab the move tool, and instead of just pulling them out, I could use the option key and just pull a copy of them instead. So then we kind of get an idea of how this would lay out. And I'm going to let it snap to the green so that I have enough room there, and I know that they're all on the same plane. So not only does this give you the pieces here, but it also shows you how to lay it out on the plywood. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start to work with some dimensions. I may need to space some of this out a little bit so that I have enough room for those dimensions. If you can keep them in the same configuration, sometimes that can be helpful. I'm going to add some general overall dimensions to it. You can get very complicated with how you do the dimensions. You'll see in the examples that mine are fairly detailed because of the curves here and also the angles of the slots. But for yours, just put in some measurements that kind of give you an idea of the overall height and width. And to do that, I'm going to click from the top, furthest top to the furthest bottom, and I'm going to pull away. And then I'm going to do it going the other way. But in the next one, I'm going to click the furthest point and pull away. Now, if I had to draw this onto a piece of plywood, I would also want to know what these smaller measurements are in between and also how to line up my center line. So I'm going to do something that we call chain dimensioning. What that means is I'm going to go in and I'm going to measure all the pieces of the corners of this piece. I'm going to just go across and pull out, and I'm going to let that link along in one line. You'll see when I zoom in that you'll be able to see the numbers a little bit better. When you do chain dimensioning, you want to make sure that your smaller dimensions add up to the overall dimension. And in this case, we have 2 feet and 2 inches on either side. That translates to and matches the overall dimension of 2 feet 4 inches. I'm going to do the same thing on this one here on the right. And here we also have 2 feet 2 inches, and when you add up these smaller inline dimensions, it will add up to your overall dimension. Now in this case, we could just put the overall dimension for the slot, but we don't know actually where that slot is in the middle. And so in this case, it may be necessary for us to use a guideline just to measure from. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull a guideline over. I'm going to mouse over. Normally it goes to cyan in the middle, but because this is grouped, it's going to be kind of a purple dot. And we also know that the halfway mark is 1 foot. So we're going to leave it there. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to measure the slot, and I'm going to include a halfway measurement from the side so we know where to locate that. You can then go around and add the dimension line to the board and also to the other pieces. Now let's say you have a radius like this. One of the ways you can check on that is you can, in this case this is grouped, so I'm just going to have to look, I'm going to select the radius itself, and I'm going to go to the entity info box, which is this one with a little, looks like a magnifying glass on it. You'll notice I selected the arc and it tells me what the radius is right here. So it's 1 foot, 1¼ inches. So I'm just going to add that into the dimensions by using the notation tool, which is this one right here, text tool. And I'm just going to click on the edge here, and you'll see that when I do that, it gives me kind of a box to pick from. I just got to make sure I know where that is. I'm going to click that, and I'm going to type in 1 foot, 1 and space 1/4 of an inch. And I'm going to put a little R in front of it, which indicates radius. That'll tell anyone what that radius is. You might also want to note what the notch is. We have the overall here, but we may also want to note what this distance is and what that distance is as well. Now we have everything dimensioned. In order to save this so that you have all the dimensions and you want to save it so that you can print out your plans, we're going to be printing these on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper with the dimensions and the layout. Situate your view so that you're looking at it from the top view. You'll want to do that here in the Scenes tab, and you'll want to click the little house. This will set it up so that you're looking directly down on your design and the plywood pieces. Use the parallel projection tool to really make this so that you're looking at it flat on. Next, we're going to go to Print. We'll go up to the File menu here, and we're going to hit Print. And you'll be able to move your object inside this print. You'll see the dimensions of the print here, 8.5 by 11. I'm going to use the hand tool for a second and maybe situate this a little bit better. And you'll notice here it says top view. You can change it to landscape or portrait if you'd like. You can also take off the white background, but I kind of like it on. I may also have to pull this up just a little bit. I don't really like that that's cut off. I could change my orientation too. Yeah, that works a lot better. So here, I'm just going to orient my measurements so that I can see it well. I can also zoom in a little bit if that helps. You don't want to lose those dimensions though. So right there will work. And you'll go ahead and you'll click Print to PDF. The next thing you might want to do is show a drawing of what it looks like assembled. I'm going to change my view back to perspective in Scenes so that I can get a better sense and orient my view so that it is a view where I can show the design off, maybe not all aspects of the design, but at least one side of it, and where I can also see some of the important measurements. So I'm just going to go in and zoom in on that a little bit, and I'm going to go back and I'm going to do the same thing where I say print. I'm going to move that over into my frame a little bit better, and maybe enlarge that, and then go ahead and say print to PDF. You'll create the dimensions for this view in the same way that you did for the pieces that are flat on the ground. And what's nice is once this is exported, you have a really good copy of what the assembly drawing should look like and how it would look if you were to lay it out onto the plywood. Please upload both PDFs to the assignment in the Google Classroom.